British Airways helicopter ditches in the North Sea. All aboard are brought safely ashore. A major leak of radioactivity at Windscale Nuclear Fuel Plant brings strong criticism from the inspectorate, and the management accepts it. An immediate rise in electricity charges and telephone bills up from November the 1st. Lord Kagan is flown back from Paris tonight to face theft and fraud charges. And at the Olympics, Sebastian Coe and Steve Ovett lead the way home in their 1,500 metres semi-finals. Good evening. A British Airways helicopter with 15 people on board came down in the North Sea, but everybody was rescued and nobody was seriously hurt. The passengers were all oil rig men. Some of them and the crew were winched to safety by another machine. Some were taken onto a lifeboat. The Sikorsky helicopter was under charter to the British National Oil Corporation. It was returning to Aberdeen from an oil rig, Atlantic 2, when it came down about 20 miles off Aberdeen. The oil pressure light went on, warning of possible engine failure. More details from Michael Burke.
For 15 minutes after the oil warning light came on, the pilot nursed the helicopter towards land. But 20 miles from Aberdeen, he decided the risk was too great and ditched the aircraft perfectly on the rolling swell. By then, an RAF Shackleton was overhead to guide a lifeboat and 3 helicopters from Aberdeen to come and rescue the men. The S-61 is the standard commuter helicopter for the North Sea oil industry, and with its boat-shaped hull is designed to float upright after ditching. Had the weather been rough, it might have been a different story. But in the calm water, the passengers were able to launch the life raft and even collect their cameras before leaving the helicopter.
And the captain of the aircraft did a beautiful job. He went right against the swell of the sea, climbed right into it with no problem at all. There was no panic in the aircraft. We left the aircraft in a very orderly fashion. I think it was third last out, yes. And the men just trooped down the aisle of the aircraft and jumped off the seat of the aircraft into the dinghy. No problem at all.
Tonight, the aircraft was towed into Aberdeen Harbour for a full engineering inspection. The passengers and crew had already been medically examined at the city's Royal Infirmary. Apart from one case of seasickness, all were well and were allowed to go home. The heliport at Aberdeen is the biggest and busiest in the world. There are 30 flights a day to the oil fields, carrying nearly 250,000 passengers a year. The pilots have always feared having to ditch in the appalling weather conditions they often encounter 100 miles and more out in the North Sea. Today, close to land and in fine weather, they were lucky.
British Airways is to hold an inquiry, and so is the Civil Aviation Authority. Earlier this year, there was a similar incident when a warning light came on and a helicopter landed on a golf course near Aberdeen. A leak of radioactivity at Windscale Nuclear Plant, discovered last year, has brought strong criticism on the heads of the management from the Safety Committee, the Nuclear Installations Inspectorate. In their report, they say the leak, believed to be the biggest from a controlled building in this country, was mainly because of a lack of safety consciousness and sound professional judgment by British Nuclear Fuels. Their managing director, Con Allday, says the report is fair. They were to blame. Brian Hanrahan reports.
The leak was only picked up by accident when boreholes were being sunk outside a building which stores liquid radioactive waste. The tests intended to check the extent of earlier contamination showed that a part of the complex, which should have been sealed off 20 years ago, was leaking, and nobody knew when it had started. A tank inside was overflowing, and 700 cubic meters of soil had been dangerously contaminated. Fortunately, the test showed that the worst of it was 10 feet down, and radiation levels on the surface were slight. But the inspectors say, disused or not, the tank should have been checked regularly and emptied. British Nuclear Fuels had failed to do so.
I accept the report. I think it's a fair report. I think it's accurate, very thorough. I accept the criticisms. I think it has to be remembered that those criticisms apply to the attitudes of management to this one particular plant, which hasn't been used since 1958. I think we have to recognise that that plant, unfortunately, became a forgotten plant. Now, it shouldn't have done, but it did, and I think that all the troubles that have stemmed in this incident really date from that, and that unfortunate occurrence.
There is, as you probably know, a great deal of concern about nuclear power. What would you say to people who say this is an example of just how unsafe it can be?
Well, if it is an example of how unsafe it can be, I would point out that no one was hurt and that there has been no hazard to the workforce or to the population. I don't think any other energy industry can claim that as its record.
The inspectors aren't recommending prosecutions. They say the checks at Windscale would have detected any radioactive dose picked up by a worker. As for the contamination, British Nuclear Fuels say that's best left buried where it is. It'll take 100 years to seep outside the site, and by then it should be safe. And they promise nothing like this will happen again.
British Nuclear Fuels say they're now in the process of spending millions of pounds modernising the older parts of Windscale to bring them up to today's safety standards. Post Office engineers say they have clear evidence that telephone tapping is being used to monitor political and trade union activities, and that it's beyond any parliamentary control. In a report out today, the Post Office Engineering Union says it's most concerned and calls for a full inquiry. The union says the problem for the individual subscriber is that it's virtually impossible for him to prove that his telephone is being tapped. The union is convinced that telephone tapping extends beyond those categories set out in the government white paper and included political organisations as well as trade unionists. David Wilson reports.
This London post office building is the alleged centre of phone tapping. It's certainly the sort of place post office engineers work. It's officially admitted that tapping is increasing. Union members think there's even more to it than that.
They believe that some of the tapping which takes place at the present time is not in accordance with the principles, the restrictions laid down by the Home Secretary.
In what directions?
Well, the Home Secretary states that telephone tapping is carried out where there is suspicion of serious crime or suspicion of major espionage or terrorist or subversive activity. Now, in the minds of our members, those categories would not include trade unionists. Yet we believe that trade unionists' telephones are tapped at both national officials and even in the case sometimes of shop stewards. Now that seems to us to be outside the terms of the Home Secretary's statement and is an unnecessary activity which, in our view, ought to be stopped.
There are other ways of finding out who you're phoning, and modern electronics, increasing powers of surveillance are worrying the engineers. Parliamentary control, they say, is particularly weak over interception operations like those of government communications headquarters and other areas where no warrant is needed.
The Home Secretary, Mr. William Whitelaw, has made it clear he stands by his statement to the Commons last April. He said then he didn't think current standards needed to be tightened by legislation. Telephone bills are to go up, and so is the cost of electricity. The Post Office wants to increase phone charges by about 20%, blaming inflation, recent pay increases, and government limitations on borrowing. Domestic consumers will face the biggest increases, about 22.5% on their bills. Rental charges will go up from £9.50 a quarter to £12. The maximum connection charge for a private phone will go up from £55 to £65. And the cost of a standard rate telephone call will go up from 3.5 pence to 4 pence. Business costs will go up on average 18.5%. The Post Office says it must make these increases if customers' demands are to be met and worn out and obsolete equipment replaced. It's confirmed that domestic electricity charges in England and Wales are going up at once by an average of 10%. It's the second increase this year, making a total of 27%. The Electricity Council's profits have dropped from the previous record of over £250 million to £37 million. The chairman, Sir Francis Toombs, says he doesn't think there'll be another increase before next April, but he emphasised the uncertainty of fuel prices. Tomorrow's the deadline for local authorities to let the Environment Secretary know their plans to cut spending. So far, 200 out of 456 councils in England and Wales have replied to Mr Heseltine's request for plans, but not all have been able or willing to make savings. David Smeaton has been looking at the issue.
In mid-June, Mr Heseltine told all councils that they look like overspending by 700 million this year, and they should trim their budgets to match government targets for public spending cuts. Most are making the effort, but many are not cutting enough to satisfy the government. While Manchester has trimmed nearly 15 million, Leeds and Birmingham say they can't cut any more. Even some Tory councils are finding the going tough, among them Avon.
Avon council offices rise high above the centre of Bristol. They've frequently been the target of strong local feelings because of council cuts in the past. Avon feels that it's worse off than many councils. It came into being only 6 years ago. It didn't have the bank balances of long-established authorities, no fat to live off, and it's been cutting back ever since. There were angry protests when the council said many teaching jobs would have to go. By last year, Avon had got rid of 400 teachers. Many other services have also been reduced. Now Avon's been told to lop over £7 million more from its £200 million spending this year. But the council disputes the way the government's reached that figure, and they're cutting only £1.7 million. Isn't there a risk the government might reduce their next year's grants?
We have made cuts each year for the last 4 years under successive government at their request, and we've kept rigidly in line with their guidelines. Now we hope, and I'm sure that other authorities who've done likewise will hope that they won't be in any way penalised. We made a tremendous cut in expenditure last year when many authorities carried on spending at their previous level.
Basic services like education shouldn't be affected by the extra cuts Avon have to make this year. But problems are already looming over next year's plans to cut the council staff by 2%.
Some councils, among them Labour-controlled Lambeth and Sheffield, say they won't cut. Mr Heseltine will decide in September whether the overall reductions are sufficient. If not, he may take action against the overspenders. So what penalties could he invoke?
Either I can reduce the capital programs of local government, which of course has the worst effect on some of the areas of greatest need, like the housing program or the old people's homes or whatever it may be. So no one wants to do that, but one can be forced into doing it. Or I can reduce the amount of cash that local government has got by clawing back money that is available from the taxpayer to finance local government. The difficulty that faces me is that I have a very large number of authorities that are cooperating with the government guidelines and are reducing their expenditure in line with our guidelines. My weapons often hit those as much as they hit those who do not cooperate.
The rebels say it's their elected right to decide not to cut and raise rates if necessary. But the councils who are trying to meet the target will be pressing Mr Heseltine to find ways to bring the rebels into line.
There could be serious social disorder in Wales if there's a persistent high level of unemployment there, warns the House of Commons Select Committee on Welsh Affairs. The committee has a Labour chairman, Leo Absey, with a majority of Conservative MPs. Its first report says there isn't just a jobs gap, but a jobs chasm in Wales, and the prospect is especially black for women. The Vice President of the Welsh Nationalist Party, David Ewan, has been arrested for refusing to pay a £25 fine for not paying his television licence fee. He's been taken to Walton Jail, Liverpool, for a week's imprisonment. He is the 5th person jailed for this offence in a campaign mounted by his party. After a post office radio and television relay station was damaged at East Harptree near Bristol, the Welsh Language Society said its members had done it. The society said the attack was part of its campaign for a separate television channel for Welsh programmes. Police said the damage was obviously the work of people who knew their way about such a station. But telephone and television links were sustained by transferring circuits to other lines. A man arrested after a siege in Birmingham in June has now been charged with the murder of 16-year-old Gail Kinchin, who died from police bullets as the siege ended. Gail, who was 6 months pregnant, was hit by 4 police shots in the siege at a Birmingham flat and died in hospital a month later. Her baby was stillborn. West Midlands Police said tonight the decision to charge 31-year-old David Paget from Rubery in Birmingham with Gail's murder was made on the instructions of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Paget is also charged with attempting to murder Gail's stepfather and 2 policemen. Abroad now, the beleaguered President Carter has seen his popularity in the opinion polls drop below that of any other American president of modern times. And now a Senate committee is convening to discuss his involvement with his brother Billy's political activities. As Gavin Hewitt reports, the affair adds strength to those Democrats hoping to find a new candidate to contest the presidential election in November.
As the revelations in the Billy Carter affair emerge, the campaign to free the delegates from their pledges to support President Carter at the Democratic Convention grows apace. These congressmen want an open convention which they hope will select a candidate more electable than President Carter. They enlisted the support of a former treasurer of the Democratic National Committee.
I do not believe that delegates should be led like lemmings into the sea if there have been superseding of circumstances that change the picture. We can all hypothesize a number of circumstances that might change the picture. I simply want the delegates to be free to exercise their wills, to vote their intellects. I don't think they should go with gags and earmuffs and blinders on.
Only about 50 congressmen and a handful of governors yet support them. The Democratic Party heavyweights have stayed away, but it is known that senior senators have discussed whether or not it might be necessary to ask Carter not to seek re-election. Within the past 24 hours, there have been two damaging revelations as far as the White House is concerned. Firstly, a Justice Department official says Billy Carter has lied. 17 days after depositing his first installment of Libyan money, he denied being paid at all. The Justice Department says if Billy Carter lied, he will be prosecuted. But more damaging as far as the White House is concerned is Billy Carter's allegation that he was given classified State Department cables concerning his Libyan activities. When asked how he had received these, he said, "Jimmy showed them to me." If this revelation is found to be true, then it raises questions as to how aloof President Carter really was from the Billy Carter affair. The president appeared today to sign an international coal agreement in the Rose Garden. He says his recollection is that the cables were of low classification and that he does not recall showing Billy the texts or giving him the copies. Billy Carter today denied having been shown anything. As he continued with his duties, President Carter reaffirmed that he won't release his delegates. His supporters say that despite the low polls and the Billy Carter affair, his delegates are not wavering in their support.
I'd like to ask the ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to say...
The Senate panel investigating Billy Carter met today to plan its agenda. It decided it would not be ready to call President Carter to testify before the Democratic Convention. So he will have to face his party with many questions unanswered. This is Gavin Hewitt in Washington.
And tonight, President Carter has cancelled a campaign tour of Cleveland, which had been scheduled for Monday. Instead, he'll be giving a news conference about his involvement with his brother. There'll be no stars and stripes at the closing ceremony of the Olympics on Sunday. After protests from the American government, the International Olympic Committee has decided not to follow protocol and raise the flag of the next host nation. The American anthem won't be played either. Instead, the flag of Los Angeles will go up, recognizing the city that will stage the Games in 1984. The committee said it was also trying to avoid embarrassing the Soviet Union. The sporting action today has included Coe and Ovett again, a hammer thrower foot-faulted, but not by the judges, and an unexpected victory for a team from Zimbabwe. Here's Michael Blakey with the details.
Tomorrow sees the second Olympic confrontation between Steve Ovett and Sebastian Coe, this time in the 1,500 metres final. The two share the world record, and it's a chance for Coe to get his revenge. But the bookmakers have made Ovett the odds-on favourite. Tonight they both are in the semi-finals, and the first to run was Steve Ovett.
200 to go, and still the Russian leading. Ovett comfortable in second place. Leukinen with the big finish third. Fourth is Radioactivity. In fifth place and closing is Steve Cram. Sixth is Busser of East Germany. And Ovett poised to go. Will he make this 45 in a row? And he's got the arrogance to wave to the British supporters from Athletics Weekly. On the finishing bend. What a piece of sheer impudence. All the way down the straight, he's celebrating. Steve Cram ran out of it. Zadrukovic goes second, Busser third, Malo Zeblin fourth. Cram nearly got there. He got out of the bunch. What a piece of running, though, by Steve Ovett.
Cram did qualify. Coe went next and seemed in trouble.
Strong East Germany coming on the outside, and Coe's in terrible trouble. He's fighting his way out again, though. He's got to rely on sheer speed and come around the outside. He's back in fifth place, four to qualify, and he's out of the trouble and round them. And look at that speed. It wasn't about tactics for him, it's about finishing speed, if he can get in the right position. Coe cruising round the outside, Straub on the inside for East Germany. Marajou of France is third, Fontanella, Italy, four. These four clear with Placci in fifth place. Fontanella tying up, but Coe wins for Great Britain.
Away from the track, the Vice President of the Olympics Organising Committee has denied allegations by Western press that there's been cheating at the Games by Soviet officials. Mr. Vladimir Popov said the allegations did not respond to reality. He was referring to doubts about how the men's javelin, discus and triple jump finals were handled. All were won by Russians. But within hours of the statement, in the hammer throw, the leading Russian Sedik, having already broken the world record, was at fault but was not penalised.
Take a look this time at the front of the circle when this man turns at the end of his third turn. We think he's foot faulted. And he didn't get a red flag. A white flag goes up, and that was measured at 81 metres and 46 centimetres, and it's a delighted Yuri Sedik that steps from the 7-foot circle. But here was me exonerating the Soviet judges, but we watch it very, very critically this time. One long turn. Second long turn, now the third one. Watch the follow-through, over the top of the rim, clearly, unequivocally, that is a foul, and no red flag went up.
Well, whether or not the Soviet judges have been favouring their own athletes, there's no doubt that the Games are a prestige event for politicians and sportsmen alike in the host country. In Moscow, Christopher Morris has been looking at how Soviet commentators on television and radio report the Games.
Another Russian triple triumph. And yet again, the Soviet flags are hoisted. It's just how the Russians planned it, sporting success and defiance in the face of the Olympic boycott. 5 times a day since the Games started, Soviet athletes have basked in the somewhat dubious glory of Olympic gold. So far, over 150 assorted medals altogether. Impressive, maybe, but hardly realistic since nearly 80 countries aren't even here. But with a daily audience of millions worldwide, the Russians have taken full advantage to transmit their sporting triumphs into political gains. There's been scant reference to Afghanistan or the Western boycott. Instead, saturation coverage of the Games, headlines spelling out Russia's successes, endorsement of the communist way of life. And protest has been censored. Viewers throughout the world didn't see these pictures of Britain's lone representative, Dick Palmer, demonstrating about Afghanistan by carrying an Olympic flag. Instead, Soviet TV gave a false impression that the entire British team was taking part.
We present a Radio Moscow World Service magazine. This is what Denis Follows, chairman of the British Olympic Association, told our correspondent Alexander Barabechik.
We are very happy and enjoying it very much indeed.
In the war on the airwaves, Radio Moscow has been using interviews with Britons to counter Olympic criticism. More subtle tactics these, putting our athletes in the propaganda frontline to express their distaste at the Union Jack not being raised or the national anthem being played. The reporting has certainly not been confined to the Olympics, with vitriolic attacks against Western leaders, Mrs. Thatcher included. Blatant propaganda then.
Well, you know, when we get into that terminology, we're always in trouble because just what do you mean by propaganda? To me, propaganda is not necessarily bad. It's putting your best foot forward, which is, I think, a good thing. I think that on the whole, the majority of the Soviets are very happy with what they've seen. The Games have been a success to us, notwithstanding the absence of some very fine athletes from Western countries. We've shown that we can prepare for the Games, that we can hold the Games. And if you want to call that propaganda, well, fine. I see nothing wrong with it.
Before the Games started, Lord Killanin, the retiring president of the International Olympic Committee, admitted that the Games will always be used as a shop window, and he expressed the hope that they would promote culture and sport, not politics. Whether the Russians really paid much attention is debatable. It's really a question of how you define propaganda. This is Christopher Morris in Moscow.
Back finally to the sporting action, but still linked with politics. None of the top ladies' hockey teams entered the competition, but their boycott led to unexpected honours for 11 girls from Zimbabwe, a country that when it was called Rhodesia was a sporting outcast. A team assembled only a few weeks ago won the gold. A report from David Cass.
This is the first time ladies hockey has been played at the Olympics, and the all-white team from Zimbabwe dominated today's final against Austria with 1 goal in the first half and then 3 more after the break. It had always been planned that only 6 teams would take part, but only the boycott, which excluded the world's best hockey nations, allowed Zimbabwe in. Nonetheless, the girls from Africa who've been excluded from international competition for the 15 years between the declaration of UDI and the founding of the new state were the surprise of the tournament. They'd arrived here expecting to gain no more than experience and were ecstatic to win their nation's first ever Olympic medal at their first ever Olympiad. There was no chance that criticism of the standard could spoil their celebrations.
It's been very good. It's been of a very high standard. It's a different style to ours, but a great experience for us, and we've learnt a lot.
What about, are you rather sad that you haven't been able to compete against some of the better countries? Isn't that so? I mean, half a dozen that aren't here.
No, we're not sad. This is a very good start for us. We've been out of hockey, international hockey, for many years, and this is a very good start for us, and we are very happy with the teams that we've played.
And back home in Zimbabwe, black demonstrators gave enthusiastic, unofficial support to the government's removal of a statue of the founder of the old Rhodesia, Cecil Rhodes. As it was removed from its site in central Salisbury, they leapt onto the lorry and beat the 9-foot statue with anything that came to hand. "We have finally buried Rhodesia," shouted one demonstrator as the statue was taken to a museum. There's been a major setback to the famine relief program in the Karamoja region of Uganda. United Nations have suspended all their food convoys and pulled their personnel back to Kampala. This follows an armed attack on delivery lorries near the Namalu mission and what's seen as a general breakdown of security in Karamoja. Brian Barron reports.
For many weeks, the problem in the famine relief operation has been insecurity, with convoy drivers justifiably fearful of ambush. It's nearly 5 days since the United Nations banned the movement of all their trucks in Karamoja. The attack which brought the ban was made by tribesmen armed with modern weapons looted from one of Idi Amin's armories last year. And 2 Cambridge medical students I met at a B mission last week have now been withdrawn to the safety of the provincial capital, following an incident in which a Karamojong assistant died. What's going to happen to the dozen or so other British and European volunteers working in hazardous conditions in Karamoja isn't yet clear. The sad fact is that these latest developments are a major blow to efforts to save 30,000 Karamojong children and countless adults who are at risk from starvation and disease. For the moment, the main burden is once again with the Italian missionaries who themselves have faced attack by the numerous armed gangs who terrorize the region. This is Brian Barron in East Africa.
Lord Kagan, the Ganex textile manufacturer, has been returned to Britain under an extradition order to face charges of fraud and theft. He was arrested in Paris in April and flown back from there today. Kate Adie was on the plane that brought him back.
Lord Kagan was handed over to 2 officers from the West Yorkshire Police at Charles de Gaulle Airport and appeared relaxed and affable on the flight. He smoked a cigar, tucked into his meal, and parried reporters' questions with a philosophical air. He faces charges including theft and fraud, but had unreserved praise for his treatment in a Paris prison and viewed his return in a matter-of-fact way.
It's a job to be done, that's all.
Do you regret anything that's happened in the past 2 years? Do you regret anything that's happened in the past 2 years?
I think I made that perfectly clear. I regret.
Are you coming home to fight, Lord Kagan? Are you going to fight hard? The allegations against you?
Oh, yes, of course. There's no question about that.
How do you feel about your treatment in the past month or so?
By whom?
By the French authorities?
Oh, the French were super correct.
And how do you contemplate the future? Are you going to fight the case?
Well, whatever is necessary. I've got good lawyers, they're highly paid, and they'll do the job.
Are you a confident man?
Well, am I a confident man? Well, if I go by my past record, I should be.
Lord Kagan is now on his way to Armley Jail in Leeds, 2 years after the warrant for his arrest was first issued. His journey lost its somewhat comfortable air at Manchester Airport tonight, when the West Yorkshire Police brought him off the plane in handcuffs. Lord Kagan, who comes from Elland in West Yorkshire, will be charged at Leeds before a court appearance later this week.
Now, the main points of the news again. A British Airways helicopter comes down in the North Sea, but all aboard are rescued. A major leak of radioactivity at Windscale is strongly criticised by the Inspectorate, and the management accepts it. And electricity and telephone bills are to go up. And that's the news tonight, so from me, good night.